I wanted to welcome everyone today and thank you for joining us. My name is Jess Buller. I am a career consultant in the Center for Career Development, and I work with the Career Everywhere team. And I'm incredibly excited to have two presenters today to talk about interviews and Big Interview. I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more, but we have Greg Pear from Target and then Kristen Soprano from the Center for Career Development here to talk through all things interviewing. So I am going to turn it over to Greg.
Awesome. Well, welcome. My name is Greg Pear. I'm the campus recruiter with Target. I cover all of New England, upstate New York, all of Pennsylvania, Northern West Virginia, Northern Maryland, and Delaware. And I do the presentation that I'm going to do. It's typically a three-part series, and it's called Impressing the Recruiter. And so I do it at typically the smaller schools, and it covers networking, resumes, networking, and interviewing. And I'm going to cover the interviewing part, and this is what I'm telling students to get ready for the interview. So let me share my screen. Christine, did you want to introduce yourself now or when you do your part? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick introduction. So my name, as Jess mentioned before, I'm Kristen Soprano. I'm also a career coach here in the Center for Career Development. And my role today in the presentation is I oversee our practice interview program in the department here, as well as the practice interview technology that our department utilizes, in addition to our team of career interns who specialize in providing practice interviews in our office. So I will complement some of the information Greg is going to be talking about shortly with the technology that we offer to help your students further prepare.
Okay, awesome. All right, so this is my PowerPoint. I'm going to get it to the beginning. I hope. I got to get it down to the interviewing part. That's the networking. All right, so selling yourself during an interview. So, what's the whole point of the interview? It's to tell employees why you're the right fit for the position. So it gives them a chance to tell them why. Talk about the skills that you have. So hopefully that matches up with the job and the job description. And then here's where I kind of focus on to try to help the kids understand, the students understand, when they're going in for an interview, besides the company interviewing them, really I ask them to switch it and realize you're interviewing the company. Is this the right fit for you? Because I always say when you go and do an interview, whether it's in virtual or, when we get back to in person, a company is sending someone to campus and we know, that's a big audience, and it should be someone who's professional, who's exciting, who's someone, when you walk out of the interview, I always tell them you should want to work with that person. And if you don't, then that might be a red flag. Is that the culture that you're going to walk into? So gather information. Now, I will tell you, I asked them, and from the previous other parts of my presentation, research is key. You can't just walk into an interview. They have to do some research. They have to have some homework that they have to go and do. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then for the company's sake, it's to determine if you're the right fit for the position. So pretty simple, what's the whole point of the interview. In terms of doing your research, like I talked about, it allows you to assess whether the company is the right fit for you when you do it all, when you gather all the information. Allows you to discover what the company is looking for. And one of the first things I ask them to do is making sure they look at the job description. It's really kind of disappointing when you're in the middle of an interview and the student doesn't even know basic things that we're asking. And we only have 2 jobs that we're posting. I know companies have several at UConn that they're posting. I'm looking for 2 positions. And the student doesn't realize what they're walking into. So making sure they read the job description. And then the biggest thing, which I will tell you as an interviewer, is nothing is more depressing than when you do an interview and the interview is going pretty well and you finish and then you turn it back to the students, say, do you have any questions? And they have no questions. And I always tell students, you should have 4 or 5 questions, basic questions that you could ask any company. Turn to the recruiter and say why, or the interviewer and say, why do you like working for the company? What's the company culture? What opportunities can I grow? Nothing's going to be worse than when you get to the company the first day and you realize this is a position that has no opportunities. It's very limited. It's a small company, whatever. So make sure you ask those questions, because I'm going to tell you, the recruiter is going to get depressed if you have no questions. It's going to say, okay, the person didn't really do any research. I'm not sure they really want to work for Target. And it's kind of like I wasted 30, 45 minutes of my time. So please, 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 I ask the students, get some questions, write them down. I get excited, I tell the students, when I do that and the student brings out a portfolio or brings a notepad and you can see they have the 4 or 5 questions written down, I get excited because I know they researched the company. In terms of research, this is kind of an older slide. I need to update this because it talks about newspapers and magazines. And basically I say, just Google it. You're going to Google the company. And then we talk about people you know who work there. And I challenge them, like the question I ask is, how do you find out someone who works at Target or someone who works at Liberty Mutual or someone who works at the Hartford? And hopefully they know they can go on LinkedIn and reach out to those people that are UConn alums and ask, do you have 5 minutes of your time to talk to me about the company? One of the things I always tell them to do when they're going on LinkedIn and they're going to reach out to someone that is a UConn alum is don't just do a connection, but do a connection and then add a note to it saying, hey, I'm interested in working at your company. Do you have 5 minutes to spare? And I almost guarantee an alumni would love to talk to a student about why they like working for the company. Also talk to them about career centers and counselors. They have information about the companies. Company info sessions, going to career fairs is going to give them more information. Job description, like I talked about, and then going to professors. Professors know a lot about the companies that in the industry, and so go there. And then the company websites. Those are basic stuff that they should be looking at before they come in for the interview. The other thing I talk about at most companies, when you're going to be in an interview, every company is going to ask you 2 basic questions. Tell me about yourself, and then tell me your strengths, which students have no problem. Like when I ask this question, everybody's pretty simple, like can name 4 or 5. But here's where they struggle, and this is where the red flags can come up for an interviewer, is tell me about your opportunities. At Target, we call them opportunities. Other companies might call them weaknesses. And the problem when students don't say they have any opportunity, I literally interviewed a student last week. I'm not gonna tell you the college, but when I asked this question, he said, I am good at everything. I don't have any weaknesses. And I explained to students, what do you think I'm thinking? The big thing I'm thinking about is what's gonna happen the first time when their supervisor, they start work with us, whether it's an internship or a full-time job, and someone says, hey, I gotta give you some feedback. They're gonna freak because they can't self-assess themselves. So make sure they know 2 or 3 opportunities, but not just tell them, hey, I'm not good at planning. That's it. Tell them I'm not good at planning, but I bought a planner in the beginning of the year. Or, hey, I'm not good at public speaking, but I'm taking a public speaking class. Or I've gone to my professor and said, hey, can you call on me as much as possible? I'm trying to get, better at public speaking. But know their strengths, know their opportunities. Now at Target and a lot of companies, we are using situational behavior outcome questions, which is, I think you guys call it the STAR method. So I just kind of walk them through this and talk about, you have to tell us a situation, a behavior, and the big thing you have to remember is talking about what I did, not what we did. Because if you keep on talking about we, typically most companies, and me too, I will say, hey, I need to know what you did. But after a while, if you keep on saying the word we're not going to interrupt. We can't have the interview go so long that you're not listening to what we just told you. So the big thing is what I did, because I need to evaluate what you did in the situation and the outcome. And I stop here and talk about why companies use situational behavior outcome questions. Does anybody know why companies use these questions? Anybody? Just throw it out. Kristen, I know you know the answer. Well, the reason is, and I'll give you a perfect example. The reason companies use this is the way we always want you to give us examples of things that happened in the past, because your actions are going to tell us the way you're going to handle the situation in the future. And I'll give you a perfect example. About 4 or 5 years ago, we used to ask the question, tell me about a time you were in a group project and someone wasn't performing. And I remember this young man distinctly, and it was not a UConn kid. And he was so excited because he had an example, which sometimes you just struggle with. But you could see, he just came out of his seat like, oh my God, I'm ready. Yeah. He goes, well, I was a sophomore year, I was a group leader of this business, whatever, 200 class. And this one kid wasn't coming to class. And I just got on the phone and called him. I ripped him a new one and told him, you better get here, basically threatened him. And he got there. And then in front of everybody else, I made sure he knew and they knew how serious I was. I ripped him a new one again. And guess what? Our outcome, we got an A in the project. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And he was so proud of that answer. But the reason companies ask those questions is at there's no way in the world I would bring him on board, because the red flag just went up. Because if that's the way he deals with problem performance, and we're going to have problem performance when he comes into Target, I don't want anybody yelling at anybody. And so that's why I use that as an example of why companies use behavioral-based interview questions. Preparing for the interview, I always ask them to, just think about what's the impact on their current job. I don't care if it's a part-time job, full-time job. What's the impact you're making? Are you making a good impact? Think about group presentations you worked on that had great outcomes. What is your legacy? What do people think about you? I want them to understand, because I think most companies do what we do, and we always ask the questions of, tell me about a time that didn't go something well. It might be as simple as, tell me about a time you made a mistake. So have those ready. It's okay to have the mistake, but what did you learn from it? But think about those power stories. Preparing for the interview, I kind of just walk them through what I'm looking for. It's basically got to tell me the situation. And that student I was gave you an example. It was a perfect situation behavior outcome. He gave me the situation. He gave me his behaviors, which is, 1, 2, 3, this is what I did. And the outcome of the action was he got an A in the project. And then what I learned. I always tell students, companies are going to ask you, what did you learn? So think about that when you're giving your stories. But that's kind of the basic setup of the way you want to give an answer in a situational behavior question. And then the other thing I just tell them is practice, practice, practice. And I mean by practice is, if your school has mock interviews, go on mock interviews. If you can go to more than one mock interview, go through more than one mock interview. Practice with anybody. Practice with your friends some answers. Practice in the shower, practice driving. The more you can tell those stories that you have, the easier it's going to be when you come to the interview. The interview itself, tips for conveying confidence. And here's what I tell them. The interview is all about the best subject you know. It's about you. So no one knows it better. So think about that. Think about their strengths and opportunities, which we already discussed. Don't over-verbalize. Be brief and to the point. And then preparation is the key. Be ready. Know that you are ready for this interview by, you research the company, you know the job description, you know what they're looking for. Walk in there with confidence. That will hopefully, keep your nervousness internal. I added these slides because we just talked about virtual. So everything's kind of the same. You still got to research, know the questions are going to come up. Test your technology. It's okay to reach out to the company and ask the recruiter if you can test to make sure, I have one school that uses RingCentral. They don't use Zoom. So, make sure your Zoom system works when the company, because most companies use Zoom. Think about a desired location. So this is important in terms of, if it's going to be in your dorm room, can you lock the door so no one's coming in during the middle of an interview? Or if you're doing it at home, you don't have dirty underwear behind you. Make it look professional to get ready. During the interview, minimize distractions up front. So, make sure nothing's in front of you. Close unnecessary browsers and applications so nothing's going to pop up for some reason. Dress the part. I don't care if they're wearing shorts during an interview, in a virtual interview, but you should wear, if the company's a suit and tie, then wear a suit and tie. If it's casual like Target, it's okay, but don't wear a t-shirt. Dress the part. Be thoughtful of lighting. I always tell them, make sure lighting is in front of you as behind you. And I will tell you, I didn't realize that until this whole, COVID stuff, and we started using all this. Body language is really important. And then don't have any paperwork in front of you is shuffling. It's really annoying to an interviewer when you're shuffling paperwork and trying to answer questions. Just focus on the candidate or the interviewer. After the interview, I always tell them to send a thank you note. I will tell you, if I interview 100 kids, I will probably get 10 thank you notes. And that could be the key. And I will tell you, honestly, it has. When my hiring manager says, Greg, I only want to talk to 3 kids. Don't give me, sending me 5 or 7, give me 3. And if I'm looking at a bunch of candidates and one did well, but he sends me a thank you note, most likely that person's going. You will differentiate yourself, or at least students will, because students just don't. We tell them, I know the career service teaches it, but not everybody sends a thank you. Then offer in terms of the decision, you can ask them, you don't ask them for feedback. That's really uncomfortable. You can request their contact information, and if offered, talk about negotiation. In terms of the interview itself, make sure they're listening to the questions, stick to the stories. It's okay during an interview, if they come to a question and they're thinking and they're getting frustrated, it's okay. Can we come back to that? no points, no one's going to sit down and write minus 10 points because they couldn't answer it right away. As long as they answer all the questions, that's all the interviewer cares. So just make sure. Stick to the stories. Tell your stories with enthusiasm. I tell them, get excited about the company. And then, like I already said, make sure they're asking questions at the end. Nothing's more depressing than if you're not asking questions. And then end on a high note, thank them sincerely. Enjoyed meeting with them, make your final pitch. They can ask about a decision timing. It's okay to say, hey, when are you planning to get back to people? When is the decision? So that if they don't get back to you at that time, you can send a follow-up email and say, hey, I haven't heard. I don't know if I missed something. Make sure you look at your junk mail. And then if they don't get any answer, then they can certainly go to Career Services. Career Services has contact in almost every company that's recruiting at UConn, and they can follow up and say, hey, Greg interviewed about 3 weeks ago. Hasn't heard. What's the story? And there might be just a miss, like, oh God, we've extended the time frame, but let them know. And then if they can, we'll get back to, again, this typically was during real time, not COVID. So, get the business card, shake on it, and send the final thing. And then the only thing I always say is just, go find a company, work somewhere you love. There are a lot of great companies that, like Target, have great cultures, but work somewhere you love. If you're not happy, go find another place. If you're not happy there, get to the third place and you're not happy, then I tell them, maybe look in the mirror, because maybe you're not either a great judge of culture or you're kind of an unhappy person. So that's my words of advice for students. Typically go do well. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. Hopefully it was helpful what the company recruiters are telling the students. All right, I'm going to flip it over to Kristen.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Greg. And one of the biggest things, there was a lot of important elements of what Greg was talking about, but one of the biggest things that I will continue to, really push students on myself to when I meet with them is the idea of preparation, specifically preparation for the not so great things, right? We all prepared for going into interviews to talk about how fantastic we are and have that humble brag and do everything that we've done. And every single time a student comes into our office for a practice interview, the two questions they always will get stumped on and they will always stare off into space about is, what are your weaknesses or areas of development? And then also the question we ask about, tell me about a time you received tough feedback. Because again, they're always preparing to talk about those really great things they did in those accomplishments. But then when somebody talks about something that's not so great, that's going to assess again that self-judge of character, their motivation, their ability to solve problems and think critically, that's where they tend to get stumped. So I couldn't agree with everything Greg said there more. So thank you very much. So I do see some questions coming in the chat. Jess, I don't know if you want to address these before I start talking about big interview.
Yeah, we can quickly go through some of these. So the question just for everyone is Target using HireVue to recruit? The answer is no, but HireVue is an applicant tracking type system. It's an AI-based interview platform. But Greg, would you be able to just very quickly maybe give an overview of what the interview process is like for a student interviewing at Target? So, are there any video, all of that?
No, in the stores, they're using videos, and I know we're testing it, but we are not using video platform yet officially. So the way we have two positions that I hire for. I hire store executive interns, and that requires, we've actually just changed it. That requires typically a phone screen where we're talking to the student. Let's say we meet them at the job fair, Target meets them, and then I would do, as the recruiter, I would do a phone screen. So I'm looking just to have a summer job or just look something put on a resume. I'm truly looking for something future. And so then they go to another interview, and that interview is a Zoom interview using situational behavior questions with one store director in the district that they want to work in, and we make a decision there. So we are changing. This is the first time we've rolled it out. I tested it, and now nationally, we are just going with one interview. For their store executive team leader, which is the assistant manager role level, they go through 3 interviews. They'll go through an interview guide A, and interview guide B, and then interview guide C is with the district manager. The district manager will make the final decision. So it's a 3-interview process for executive team leaders, a 1-interview process, and a screen for an interim position.
Awesome, thank
Am I
you.
losing everybody?
What was that? You are muted.
You guys,
There.
did you hear what I said? I don't know, because my Wi-Fi is acting funky. I'm sorry.
Yes, no, we got that.
Okay.
If anybody has any follow-up questions to that, or other interview-based questions, feel free to continue putting them in the chat, whether it is something that Greg referenced earlier, something that Chris is about to talk about, and then we can take care of the rest of the questions at the end. That was a great question, so thank you.
Okay, so now I'll go into a little bit more about how the Center for Career Development can help your students really prepare for these interviews to put into practice some of the best, the tips that Greg just shared for students. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen here with you to show you one of the main resources that we utilize in our office. So this is we have multiple resources that we can talk about, which I'll definitely talk about in general, both our in-person and our virtual, but I think just in the world we're living in right now with so much being done virtually, I want to kind of start there first. So I do want to showcase off Big Interview. Some of you might already be familiar with this. Some of you might have already heard about it, but this is a fantastic tool that we have on our on our website. And when you go to our website, career.uconn.edu, and you click on the Prepare for an Interview section, you'll find tons of great resources that your students can utilize to really help them prepare for every aspect of their interview. So this is how they can access Big Interview. They can see a lot of our on-demand videos. We have our interview preparation guide. If you take a view through that, you'll actually see a lot of the same concepts and tips that Greg just referenced in his presentation showcased in there as well. So that just goes to show a lot of the similarity of what we are teaching in our offices compared to what employers are looking for and what employers are also sharing with students as well too. And lots of other great resources and tips as far as worksheets that really help students prepare. So the interview preparation guide, what Greg was talking about, assess your skills, assess your past experiences, be prepared to talk about them in that a self-assessment worksheet, the reflection worksheet. How do you debrief after an interview? So how do you really assess your performance after an interview as well too, and use it to prepare for future interviews? And a lot of other great tips that they can find out as they're going through here as far as how to prepare specifically for virtual interviews, all-day interviews, med school, if you're preparing for MMIs. So lots of great information here that your students can access. But again, coming back to Big Interview, this is an opportunity that allows students to really try to put themselves in as much of a simulated interview experience as possible from their own residence, their homes, their dorms, apartments, friends' houses, whatever. So Big Interview is something that's set up to learn and to practice. So let's first start here by the learning component of Big Interview. You'll see this offers a couple different options based on either Fast Track or Mastery Track. So this is really great, the Fast Track, if a student has an interview coming up, but maybe doesn't have a lot of time to prepare. This is where they can actually click into the Fast Track and they can go ahead and see all these different aspects of interview fundamentals that they can come up, and they have an individual who physically goes through each of these steps with you, and you can see the script that comes down here as well. So everything from best practices to answering certain types of questions, maybe to be familiarized with what to do in a situation where if I'm asked an inappropriate question, or maybe how do I master nonverbal communication? So the idea of body language and eye contact, what should that actually look like? A little bit too of what Greg was talking about before with analyzing the job description. What should you be looking for and how should you be speaking to it in your interview? And then it also brings up the idea of the common interview questions. So strengths, areas of development, where do you see yourself in the future? What are your future plans, your goals? So the Fast Track really gets to those specific high-level nitty-gritty aspects of interviewing when you first think of that on the main level. Then they also have the mastery track option. So this might be better off for those students who maybe don't have an interview coming up, but they've just never had a real interviewing experience and they just really don't know what to expect and they want to try to get as much information as possible. The mastery track option is really great in the sense that it brings in a lot of the same elements of what the fast track talked about as far as analyzing the job description in basic questions, nonverbal communication, but this will also go deeper into certain aspects of, again, talking about your failures, talking about your work ethic. There's some aspects in here, I just forget which section it falls under, but it goes into specifics, maybe if you're an individual where English is a second language for you, if you're somebody who's maybe in the process of changing careers or changing industries and how to speak to that, if you were in the military and now you're entering the civilian world. So this mastery track really gets into a lot more specifics of different types of scenarios, but can still be very present in everyday situations. A lot of these videos are very long. So this is something where it is self-paced. So the student can really go in and do it at their, if they want to spend 5 minutes a day, if they want to go in and just binge watch a lot of the videos, they're welcome to do that too. But the student has the ability to stop and start as they see fit, so they can really digest the information as they see fit, which is one of the, I think, better aspects of the learning modules here. In addition to the learning modules on Big Interview, you can see they also have some other sections for beyond interviewing, so resume, negotiation. We tend to really just focus it more on this for the interviewing component, but certainly students can kind of get a little bit more information out of this resource as well too if they're looking for it. The second aspect of Big Interview is the idea of practice. So once you've learned the key fundamentals of interviewing, how are you going to start implementing it? How are you going to start practicing it on your own? And that's where they can come up to the practice section here, and you'll show the different options that they can choose from. We're just going to go straight into the practice interview section here. And this is where students will be able to go to really immerse themselves in a fictitious interview role play, if they will. So they have a couple different options of how they want to practice. They can choose to just do a general start, which will just be really a random roulette of typical interview questions that they can utilize to start generating ideas, brainstorming some responses if a question like that were to come up. If the student is planning on interviewing for a specific industry, Big Interview has a large catalog of industries in here that students can prepare for. You'll see everything from maybe working in an administrative role to maybe they want to work in biotech or engineering. There's some healthcare samples, some business related positions. So the students can really go in here and try to get as tailored of an experience as possible to what they might encounter in the type of industry they're applying for. So if we were just to click on insurance there, you can see information that comes up about actuary or claims rep or sales. And so then once the student chooses, oh, I think this is the one that most represents what I'm looking to apply for, they can click on that interview and then it says, okay, do I want to focus on that more general claims rep interview position? Do I want to focus more on the claims rep that's going to really ask me to enhance my communication skills or my ability to work under pressure? Maybe in a claims environment, they're working in a call center position and they really need to be able to handle multiple incoming calls and balance a high incoming call load. So that could be a great one that they might want to practice for if the job description alludes to that. But once the student goes ahead and selects what they want to do, this now becomes the role play scenario they're in. So there is a recorded actor that asks the question. And if I wasn't sharing my camera with you on Zoom right now, I would then see my own face right in here. And what this would allow me to do is go ahead and start the question. The interviewer will ask the question. It'll give a countdown. So when you hit start recording, it'll give a countdown and then you record yourself giving your answer, which the student then has an opportunity to watch back afterwards. It's great for a couple different reasons. One, it really helps them be able to perform that self-assessment of how is my response? Is it an appropriate length? Am I using too many filler words? Am I not making eye contact? Maybe I didn't fully execute the STAR method. So this really allows them to utilize a little bit of that self-grading, if they will. When they record these responses, they don't go anywhere. Nobody has access to see the student's information other than the student or who the student designates as a recipient. They do have the option to share those responses with people, or they can choose to keep them private in their own library, but we don't see it, nobody else sees it. It does show the questions that are going to be asked on here alongside. So this would be the order of which the questions appear. I personally am not a fan of that because I don't think it necessarily mimics a true interview experience where you don't know what questions you're going to be asked. So in some ways, this kind of helps guide the student through it. But it's still helpful in the sense of, maybe it is the first time they're doing this, knowing the questions in advance are great, but certainly knowing that, when they get into a real interview experience, they have to be prepared for the unprepared. So another way that the students can practice is by thinking a little bit more beyond industry, but what is the competency or skill set that I know I might most need to speak about? So again, assessing the job description. And if you see all over the job description that you're going to be asked to describe your analytical skills or your problem solving skills or something like that, they can choose to go in and practice answering interview questions that specifically hone in on that skill set. So analytical, decision-making, prioritization, organizational. So these would then all be questions, again, that would focus on talking about experiences or situations in the past where you've demonstrated those strong organizational skills, if they know that's going to be a key component of the interview as well. So again, these are really great, and you can see there's also a question library. So if the student wants to dig in a little bit deeper, they can certainly go in and say, what if I want to look at questions by, again, the specific roles there, and just have another way of, dental school, med school. If I want to filter it a little bit more differently, they have the option to go in through that aspect of it. Another fantastic way that Big Interview can be utilized beyond just the individual students' use is through faculty and staff use as well too. So this is where we start to come more into the idea of assignments. And hold on. Actually, before we get into assignments, one other quick thing I want to show you about the practice. When they come to the main practice page here, you'll also see that all of what I've just showed you falls under these standard sets. So these are the things that directly get populated by Big Interview, that Big Interview creates. But there's also this idea of custom sets right here. And really, these custom sets are similar to what I just showed you, with different questions that get asked to mimic a role play scenario. But these are ones that the Center for Career Development can actually create and make available to all students. And this can be done either on our own accord, or this can actually be done in partnership with you as faculty and staff members or anybody along those lines. So we have in here where we have specific engineering custom sets where we custom tailor some of our own interview questions to interviewing related questions UConn students might experience, IT related, management. So this really allows us, nonprofit and public sector, this really allows us to capitalize on the idea of maybe what's missing in Big Interview that we know aligns with our majors here, or that we know aligns with our student needs, and allows us to create that. So if you're in a department where you realize, hey, my students are constantly saying that, they're utilizing your resources, but maybe it's just not aligning to their specific needs, that can be a conversation we can have. And maybe we'll partner with you to think about, all right, what are some common related industry questions your students might face depending upon the roles they're going into? And then maybe how can we create this custom set to exist on Big Interview for them to also practice with? So just so you know, that's an opportunity that exists there. That then feeds into what I was just speaking to about assignments as well too, where as faculty and staff, specifically if you teach courses, we can actually create a custom assignment that your students can complete as part of their course requirements. So this kind of brings in a little bit of the idea of what we were just talking about with the custom set, where we might be able to say, all right, let's sit down based on what you're teaching this semester or in a particular given week. What are the key elements you really hope your students are taking away? What are you hoping they're going to be able to articulate down the road? Maybe there's a specific theory or concept you're including into academics that you know is going to be really integral in helping them succeed in their career? How do we get them to feel familiar talking about that and maybe bringing that up in an interview? So that's where we can sit down and kind of put our heads together and think about how could we incorporate some of these questions into an assignment that they need to complete as part of your course, where you can get to actually see them given those responses and maybe provide feedback on those responses or grade those responses. So you'll see there's just a couple that we've already set up that are here. It's important to note that when an assignment is created, it actually gets a special assignment code. So that way, the only students who can take this assignment are those ones in your course, those ones who have that code. All the other practice ones we talked about on here, whether they're the big interview ones or the custom sets, every student at the University of Connecticut has access to these simply by creating a big interview account. It's these assignments that are more tailored and custom to people specific, where your students will need a code in order to access them. And so you can see that we've done a couple for our SYE courses here. You can see some where we've already partnered with like poli-sci classes to go ahead and do that in here. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. So we can either set it up as maybe we can record those questions, or we can pull some of the stock questions that are already in there and just create those as a custom assignment for you. Or we can even potentially talk about getting you set up in our system to be able to go in and record those questions yourself. That might be a great idea, where maybe you have a bunch of faculty members who are teaching the same course and you want to have different people ask the different questions. You can really incorporate a full departmental grouping into that to be able to go in and do some recording. And I'll show those to you in a few seconds. When you go ahead and you do that, though, there's a couple different options. Again, either you can go ahead and watch the videos and just provide your own feedback to the student, or another thing that we've done specifically with these SYE courses is sometimes we've incorporated the idea of doing peer feedback, where we encourage the students to partner up with each other, or you assign partners, however you decide to make that work, and you have each student go ahead and record their responses to their assignment, but then they share it with their peer. And then we can provide a worksheet like this that mimics, similar to the form that we utilize in our practice interviews here in the office. And what this does is this then brings out the specific questions that were asked in that interview. And it provides a lot of the main elements that you would expect to see given in that response. So right, when Greg talked before about the behavioral questions, here's an example of a behavioral question that would be asked. And then this allows the student to say, did you really provide that situation? Did you talk about the actions? And more importantly, did you use I statements as opposed to the we statements in those actions? So it really allows you to, again, assess those main tips and best practices, and then provides an opportunity for that peer reviewer to provide some notes and feedback to the person who submitted the response to them. So again, if you went down the route of an assignment, this could be a conversation we could have on, is this something you might like to do? Or is this something where maybe not as a peer reviewer, but you might like to fill out for each of your students? So again, more conversations that could be had on this down the road if you chose to pursue something like this. I'm going to quickly switch to the admin side here to grab a quick code for one of these assignments so that I can go ahead and show you what they look like. So on the back side, this is the code that a student would get. And then if I go back to the student side here and I click on assignments, I can go ahead and type that code in there. And this is what the custom assignment recording will look like. This is where if I click through these, you'll see a lot of Center for Career Development staff members in here, and they are the ones who personally recorded these questions to be asked. So you can see me here in my much thinner pre-COVID days. And then you can see a lot of our other interns who have recorded. This also helps to mimic a real life interview situation in the sense of, not only might you not know the question, but you might also not know the person who's going to be asking that question. So it also gives you that comfort in being able to speak to a camera, or being used to speaking to a new individual, or really just being kept on your toes throughout the process. In addition to Big Interview, we also have practice interviews in our office. That's where students have the opportunity to really come in and meet with a career coach like myself or one of our trained interns who are specifically trained on delivering practice interview feedback. Similar to the way we have our student interns provide critiques for our undergraduate resumes, we also have highly trained interns that focus on providing feedback specifically to interview and performance, again, related to the Tell Me About Yourself, strength and weaknesses, STAR method, all of the information that Greg shared about before. So they are definitely getting information that correlates with what employers are looking for. I welcome an opportunity. Again, I oversee our practice interview program as well as our interviewing technology. So if anybody ever has any questions about how can I further incorporate this into my curriculum, or we just love to have somebody come and maybe do a presentation to our class about interviewing, or you just have any other ideas or thoughts and questions about any of our resources in general, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through anything in more detail, answer any specific questions you may have, or really figure out ways that we can continue to partner with you from a departmental perspective.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Chris. We do have a question that came through the chat, which is there a limit to how many mock interviews students can do? So I'm going to turn that to you, Chris, and ask both from a perspective of within Big Interview and then also, a one-on-one practice interview with the office.
Yeah, so from a Big interview perspective, there is no limit as to how many times a student can go in and utilize this. It is a resource that exists on there 24/7. It is a resource that the department pays for. So quite honestly, we would love to have students go in there and utilize it as many times as they would like to really make sure we're getting that return on investment. But yeah, they can, if they wanted to go in there and complete a practice interview with every single scenario that existed, every single industry, every single competency, they are more than welcome to do that. And then if they wanted to go back there and do that a second time around, they can certainly do that as well too. As far as the practice interviews within our office goes, usually the way our program is designed is really to focus on maybe about 2 or 3 practice interview role play appointment itself. Reason for that is we do not tailor the practice interviews to the students coming in. So if a student indicates I'm coming in for med school, or I'm coming in for an interview in publishing, or I'm coming in for an interview in marketing, we don't tailor the questions that are asked specifically to those job descriptions or specifically to those industries. Reason we do that is, again, students need to really understand the concepts and fundamentals of interviewing. They need to understand how to create an interview narrative and how to create a response, not how to respond to one particular question for one particular industry that may or may not be asked, or may or may not be asked in a completely different way. You can ask one interview question 20 million different ways. To Greg's point before, what's your opportunity? What's your weakness? What's an area of development, right? There's all different ways to do that. So we teach the premise of, again, understanding how to create a narrative and how to understand what the interviewer is asking for. That way you can take that information and apply it to any industry or any question that is being asked. So because of that, they're really only going to have an opportunity to really answer that 2, maybe 3 times before it becomes a little repetitive. So once a student has maybe exhausted 2 or 3 practice interviews with our office, but then still has additional questions or wants to hone in on specific aspects, that's where we recommend they schedule a 30-minute career coach and come in and meet with a career coach like myself or Jess to really have specific targeted conversations about the questions they still have.
Yeah, Big Interview is honestly such a helpful resource. I often tell students that I used to start every answer to a question in an interview with "that's a great question," and I didn't realize it until I had to watch myself back on Big Interview. And obviously it's a good question because the interviewer has selected to ask that question. And it's never fun to watch yourself back on a video answering an interview question, but I definitely think that it is a very tangible resource that students find a lot of benefit from. A lot of them just aren't super aware that we do have it. And I also oftentimes will have a student who comes in, asks specific questions, or how do I answer this question or that question? And then have them do a big interview and then make a practice interview appointment once they've gotten that under their belt. So definitely using all of our resources combined is a student's best bet. Does anybody have any other questions for either Greg or Kristen?
I will say too, while maybe we're waiting for some people to think of a few more questions. Another great thing about Big Interview, and I kind of just quickly glanced over this when I was talking about this before, not only does it allow you to see, oh, I'm answering every question with that's a great question, it really helps prepare students for the one-way interview. Greg, I don't know if Target is using this. It doesn't sound like they are or not, but there are some companies, I believe like Stop and Shop for a while, Blockbuster Video used to be doing this too, where instead of having an initial phone screen with a recruiter, they would have a one-way recorded interview where a student would be sent a link where they'd have to go in and there'd be preset questions. They had to just respond to a computer. They didn't even have a person to talk to, or there's a telephone number that they have to dial into. And essentially they're just leaving a voice message with the response. And those can kind of sometimes be weird because when you think about interviews, again, being conversations, when you don't have that other person to converse with, it makes it a little bit more awkward. It makes it a little bit more difficult to answer those questions. So Big Interview is also a great way to just practice talking to a computer and formulating a response to a computer. Greg, again, I don't know, it doesn't sound like Target's utilizing that, but I don't know if you have anything you want to add on the idea of those one-way interviews.
No, the stores are for team members. They are. So it's they are using, because I remember I was just talking to a young gentleman who's my son's friend, and I referred him for an asset protection position. And then he came over the house, he got the job, but he goes, oh my God, that was crazy. You got 2 chances or 3 chances after that, whatever you think. And it was difficult for him. So yeah, we are using it in the stores, but not at the management level. Yep.
There is another question in the chat, and I can answer this one. The question is, if a faculty member wants to use Big Interview, but needs help determining how to select some transferable skills, how to come up with, the components of the assignment, can someone from the Center for Career Development help with that process? Talk through idea formation through kind of to the end product. And the answer is absolutely yes. So we have representatives in our office that are kind of focused on specific academic areas. So every major, every school or college has a liaison to our office. So we can connect you. So Indo, we can connect you directly with who your liaison would be. It's Aaliyah Castleberry, and I can make that connection for you. But Aaliyah can absolutely help you. We are here to brainstorm, the connections between your course and the skills you might want the students to practice, the industry, and all of that. So that's a big yes.
Yeah, and I did that not too long ago with our sport management department as well too. One of our career champions in sport management is huge about incorporating Big Interview into a lot. And prior to COVID, we actually sat down and said a little bit more about how could we really do this? What do we want to do? What do you hope your students will be able to learn and articulate about what they're learning in their courses, and what are the key fundamental skill sets that they should be talking about when they think about going out to interview? And we were actually able to sit down, come up with some ideas and generate some questions together. So absolutely something that can be a partnership.
Another thing that I will add that I think, so Big Interview does have, those specific areas and competencies, but NACE, which is our professional organization, also has a set of kind of career professional competencies that we're hoping that students have and are able to articulate as they enter the workforce. And I will put the information in the chat for this actually, but our next Career Champion training session is all about the NACE competencies. I'm talking about professionalism and soft skills. And so I think incorporating maybe some of the more specific industry focused skills, but also thinking about the NACE competencies and those transferable skills as well would be a really good way to incorporate that into the Big Interview assignment connected to your course. Those are great questions. Are there any other questions? And I apologize for missing that one initially. All right, well, I will be here for the next couple of minutes. So if anybody has questions, feel free to stay around. But otherwise, on behalf of the entire Career Everywhere team, I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to attend this session. The impact that you're having on students does not go unnoticed, and we are really appreciative of all of the work that you are doing. And I want to give a special thank you to both Kristen and Greg for sharing your insights and expertise with all of us today. It is very, very helpful. I know I work in it and it's still, I'm able to take stuff away. So we really appreciate it. And we hope that you all have a great rest of your day.
Awesome.